All right, thank you again for joining us this morning. My name is Eliza from Makerere University, Biotechnology University, Biotechnology Society, sorry, at Makerere University. I'm really glad that you're able to join us. A few of our colleagues will be joining us shortly. So I think we begin here, and of course, usually this meeting is recorded so that members who are unable to make it can be able to find this on our social media handles, especially YouTube. So I want to thank you so much for logging in. I want to welcome our guest speakers today, our panelists. I think right about now we are going to start right here. So the necessity and desire to advance and protect intellectual property has been around for centuries. For example, the Berne Convention since 1886. Now, why is it that the existing intellectual property sectors have not made more progress than they have? Or maybe why is it that the different entities, especially those that our members belong to, and like I'll be introducing them in the session as we go like in the next minutes. Why is it that the different entities have not had big progress than they have, compared to what we are seeing right now? What is it that some of these questions and many more shall be answered on this panel discussion, and I want to ask from the staff members that are joining us. Actually, our patron is with us for the society. Dr. Sadiq, and you on the call. Many more other colleagues will be joining us shortly, but I just thought we'd keep time. By introducing one of our panelists, Nahayo. She is currently the Senior Incubator and Commercialization Officer at National Agricultural Research Organization. She holds a degree in Science Technology and a master's in with a specialty in strategic management. She has experience of 5 years in various aspects of intellectual property management and innovation support. Through her career, she has worked with and supported inventors and innovators from different fields such as engineering, ICT, agriculture, among others, in developing and she has a wealth of experience involved in national and institutional IP policies and strategies. So as part of her work, she trains and supports technology developers in product development and has developed a broad game to be used as a tool to teach several innovations. Currently, part of her work in NARO involves the establishment of innovation and incubation centers to strengthen and support the agricultural innovation ecosystem. So that is one of our panelists, Ms. Eliza Nahayo. Our other guest speaker today shall be Mr. from Mugisha. I think the name in the quotes, I think you maybe say it yourself when I give you a chance to maybe briefly say something. But she's a co-founder and managing partner, Innovate Labs Africa Limited, and an entity committed supporting startups, medium and small-scale enterprises, academia and public research institutions strategically manage the innovation and intellectual property value chains. Very passionate about strategic utilization of innovation and intellectual property in attainment of sustainable development goals, Africa Agenda 2030, and national specific development aspirations, like some of what we've been discussing on these sessions. Maybe the last session we had with Dr. Peter Wanyama. He brings in a wealth of experience in new product development in the industry, tailored on human-centered design approach, innovation and intellectual property value chain management, as well as scaling up of innovations with the public sector, mentoring startups and academia across in planning ideas to products and eventual commercialization. I think that is the whole aspect of intellectual property. His education background includes a bachelor's degree in industrial chemistry from here, Makerere University. We are actually proud to have you. He also has a master's in synthetic organic chemistry from University of Southampton, UK, and a master's degree in intellectual property from Africa University. So Mugisha has the following notable past current leadership roles. Actually, he was former Commissioner for Innovation and Intellectual Property Management in the former Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation, which is under transition currently. He has also been a member of African Policy Research and Advisory Group on Science, Technology, and Innovation. He's a member of the Steering Committee for implementing of Uganda National Intellectual Property Policy, I may remind, in 2019. So he's also a member of Global Innovation Advisors for the international development. Thank you so much and welcome our guest speakers and panelists this morning. Like I introduced myself, I'm Perez. I'm actually a student of biotechnology, currently at Makerere University. My colleagues will be joining in. I've really sent out a call, so I will ask us to begin right here. If I may give a minute to our panelists, just a minute, you say something, what you do currently, what you do, and talk about just a few things probably I could have missed. And then we can begin our session and talk about what exactly is affecting our intellectual system here in Uganda. Yes, Mr. Patrick, you can begin.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know, for some reason, I think your network is a little bit shaky. So I think we're not actually getting you clearly, but I don't know if I'm clear enough. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can hear you.
Okay, brilliant. So and also maybe I'll try to remove the video. I just wanted to try to connect my face to the voice. So I'm the one here, and yeah. So let me now remove my video, and then I just proceed to respond to what you said kindly. So thank you so much, Perez, for first reaching out to us, and I'm quite excited to be part of this engagement. One, it means a lot to me because at strategic level, I've been part and parcel of this journey of looking to set up the required regulatory frameworks as far as relating to bioeconomy. And so I'm happy that now I'm also coming to offer more insight, especially to the students and those who are enthusiastic about the whole space of biotech and the bioeconomy. And so I think it's the right opportunity. So my middle name, as you said, it's Mugi. Yeah, so that's Mugi. So you can, that's also basically what also defines me. So if you can't recall Mugi, just call all the names, but Mugi is good to go. Yeah, so thank you, sir, and I look forward to diving into the session.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Patrick. Ms. Eliza, please go ahead.
Thank you, Perez. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you to discuss this very interesting topic. Myself, I was also once a student of biotech, though I've never really practiced biotech. And I found myself in the land of IP, something that I'm very passionate about. My work in NARO is mostly to do with IP commercialization, but I also do a lot of, right now I am setting up incubation for NARO so that we can be able to incubate good ideas and technologies so that they're successfully marketed into they successfully transition into the market. So I think and I hope that today we provide useful insights to you for the students who are here so that you get excited to be part of this thing called bioeconomy and ways in which you can contribute. So I can't wait for us to begin, and I think you will get to hear more from me as the discussions continue. Thanks, Perez.
Thank you so much, Ms. Eliza Nahayo. Thank you so much for that introductory note. Now, if I may just delve in right now. So since we are here to educate and disseminate public knowledge, I would like to ask Mr. Patrick Mugisha to tell us about the various intellectual property rights that are there. Tell us how some of these actually
Perez, I think kindly control your people. Someone who's not speaking, let them just stay muted. Otherwise, we won't be able to listen to each other.
Indeed. I should
Yeah, please.
Manually. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, just mute anyone who's not speaking, and then unmute when they want to raise an issue. Thank you very much, Perez. Yeah, and the audience, please, let's just maintain these simple rules. If you were outside in a hotel somewhere, maybe that would have been much easier. But now, these are some of the limitations for with virtual engagements. Indeed. So, just in a nutshell, I just want to just give a small background, short background of what encompasses intellectual property. So basically, when you talk of intellectual property, it goes back to you first holding your head and realizing that actually that's the powerhouse for ideas. And it means that every time you're trying to, you're caught up in a particular problem, this could be a technical problem, it could be a systemic problem, or maybe organizational problem. Chances are you're likely to try and innovate around and get some potential solutions to mitigate those kind of challenges. And as the old saying goes, that a necessity is the mother of all invention. And so this is something that I believe every one of us really has to appreciate, that when there's a need, people are triggered to think. So in the same way, when there's a problem, people are going to be triggered to think. And all this spans back to the time during the first, second, third industrial revolution, where people actually looking at how do we tackle some of the technical problems that on one end can turn out to have industrial applicability. So that's why today you're able to talk about the steam engine. We no longer talk about the steam engine. A lot has happened. We no longer talk about the classical light bulb that Thomas Edison was able to discover. We no longer talk about the processing lines, automation processing lines that Sir Henry Ford was able to put in place for the automobile industry. A lot has happened ever since. But what was that was actually triggering these things to happen? The whole point was, if I'm in business and I come up with a new solution, then I'm entitled to some form of what? Incentive. And essentially, that's basically how intellectual property has been growing over the ages. And as you mentioned, looking at some of the oldest forms of IP, actually, you might find that right now, just that in record, we are talking of something to go with maybe like the 18-something. But actually, some of the intellectual property rights, just recognition of incentivizing people to actually create solutions for problems, began as early as in the 1500s and the 1600s. So really, there's a lot in terms of history regarding all this aspect. So IP is the creativity of the mind. You're able to turn what you're thinking into something that is tangible. And that means that you're able to sit back, think through your ideas, come out of your head, turn them into something tangible, and then they should actually be reflected and in something that can actually be turned around, either in terms of a process, it could be in terms of a product, or just any technical solutions for a technical problem. So IP is classified under two distinct areas. One, you're looking at industrial property. And industrial property, we cover the likes of patents, patents which actually confers protection for inventions, which are solutions to technical problems. Then we also have what we call utility models, which are also referred to as petty patents or lesser patents, because whatever you require to in protecting to qualify for a utility model, rather than the way for a patent, you require the invention to be novel or original or new, and should have an inventive step and also industrial applicability. For the utility model, you don't need that particular solution to have the inventive step. So that gives you the benefit to actually acquire a utility model. Then you've got industrial designs. Industrial designs, basically, these are objects that have got aesthetical, ornamental aspects of an object. This could be a 2-dimension two-dimension in the sense, for example, if you look at a fabric, yeah, a textile fabric, for example, in the fashion industry, a lot is happening. You remember the changes, or maybe in Buganda, there's this Gomez, Gomesi, and also among the Muslim world is what we call the Sharias, those kind of things. Those are two-dimension fabrics, but of course, when you're able to design them, you can actually get industrial designs. What about the phones that you're holding right now, or maybe that you're using to access this session? What about maybe the wristwatches you're putting on, or maybe the seat that you're actually sitting on? All those are artifacts that have got some ornamental and aesthetic perspective. So that confers upon you industrial design rights. Then you look at what we call trademarks. Trademarks, as long as you're going to be able to exist in the marketplace, then you definitely need a sign, you definitely need a logo, you definitely need maybe either maybe a slogan that will be able to separate or identify your products, goods and services that you're producing as maybe Perez from that I'm saying Babilia is going to be able to do what to produce in the marketplace. So for example, if you look at this sound of MTN that you know it, the MTN sound, that carton, you know it, it's very familiar. Or the Nokia tone, when you switch on the Nokia phone, those sounds, yeah? So those are also potentially, those are trademarks. Then the slogans, MTN, what's the slogan for MTN? Someone can type it on the what? On the chat. The people who know the slogan for MTN and also the one for Airtel, yeah? You type it on the chat. I'll give you gifts after, yeah? So you type that if you know the slogan for MTN and the one for Airtel, you put there. And then also, you could also be looking at even like some slogans, even of some political parties. You can even put for me the slogan for NRM, FDC, and maybe no, put them down there. These are, you're going to be able to recall these things. Then we go as far as what we call trade secrets. I mean, each one of us here has got secrets or keep some forms of information that you consider confidential. But remember, when you talk of trade secrets, something must have commercial value. So a secret with no commercial value does not qualify in the commercial space to be a trade secret. And this should not actually be common among other players who are existing in that particular area. For example, if you're looking in the bioeconomy sector, what is that confidential information that you feel could be technical that it's not known by my other players in the bioeconomy space? Yeah, it could be a process of transforming a microorganism from one form to the other, and it's only known to you by your own company. So that information, you can keep it. But one of the classical examples when we talk of trade secrets is the Coca-Cola formulation. Yeah, so this is something that you may need to recall. And Coca-Cola decided to adopt multiple angles of intellectual property around that product. And there's both the trade secrets as well as patents and designs. So that formulation remains. That's why you find the test for Coca-Cola, the test for Pepsi-Cola, and now maybe Reham Cola, they will never be the same. Then finally, we go to also what may also be very important. You're looking at geographical indications. Now, as biotechnologists, I know biomass, working with biomass is a very critical aspect in your career and your professional lives. So if you're looking into the seed varieties, you're looking into coming up with a new animal species or kind of like genetic engineering, all this space, there's a lot that you can actually be able to create in this space. So with geographical indications, you're able to look at what are those key attributes that actually are not determined by man, but are determined by the climate and nature, God-given, yeah? So yesterday, if you're able to follow the Africa Free Continental Trade Area strategy design for Uganda, which is happening at Serena, co-funded by Ministry of Finance, UNDP, and other partners, one person was saying that, you know what, Ugandan pineapples are very sweet and have got a unique taste. Now that uniqueness, it may not be a human being who has impacted it, but it's nature. So that one makes it quite unique. So GIs can also be taken on that respect. And it's one of the core strategies that bio-based products can also be protected. Then you've got copyrights. Right now, as I'm speaking now, I believe people are capturing notes of this discussion. and everyone is going to interpret their notes in a very different way on a case by case. But already there, you've actually created your own copyright. Copyright does not protect ideas, it protects the expression of ideas. That's why you can read a novel, Chinua Achebe, you're able to sing a song. I don't know which common song you guys love most, maybe in Uganda, your favorite musician. Those songs, the poems, I mean, people have written dancers and playing instruments. The Katumwas, Isaiah Katumwas playing his saxophone. Those are creative arts and they're all working out. So in a nutshell, really, intellectual property goes around that space. So just to wrap up this introductory, now intellectual property has a value chain, which is distinct. You're looking at, you generate the IP, you protect the IP, you commercialize the IP, you enforce the IP. So I think around that space, as we move on, we shall be able to tackle some of these facets as relates to the bioeconomy. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Patrick. That was really a good, insightful into the, let me try to meet these people. They just want to listen. Thank you so much. So I want to get back to Miss Eliza to tell us the status quo of the intellectual property system in Uganda right now, telling us where Uganda is currently in on the trend to reaping the benefits of intellectual property rights currently. Thank you so much, Miss Eliza. Talk about the policy, where we are, its status, current status quo of the whole system.
Yeah. Thank you, Perez. So right now, I could start by saying that Uganda has a pretty tight legal framework that covers almost all the different IPs that Patrick has taken us through. And most of them, you can register for them and you can actually get those rights. Now, when I say most of them, it's because there are some IPs that right now, currently, despite the fact that we have the laws, we are not able to actually apply for them and get them. An example is the plant variety protection. And the only reason is that despite the fact that we have a law, the Plant Variety Protection Act of 2014, we do not have regulations. Now, regulations are what makes the act implementable. So the absence of those regulations makes it impossible for a plant breeder to be able to go and apply for plant breeders' right. So in that aspect, currently in Uganda, we're not able to apply for plant breeders' rights, but that doesn't stop one from benefiting from the IP related to plant breeders. Then also, I think, I don't know how far we are with the geographical indications, the Act. I think the last time I was aware of it, it wasn't fully developed. So we do have laws, but implementation of some of those laws are not there. So we do have the Industrial Property Act, which covers patents and patents and the petty patents. And we have the Trademarks Act. We have a law for trade secrets. We have copyright law. We have laws on industrial design, geographical indications, but just that some of them do not have the regulations to be able to, for us to implement them. Then in just last year, the National IP Office, which is the Registration Services Bureau, it released the National IP Policy. So this National IP Policy, it is a framework that is supposed to guide different institutions on how we are going to strategically handle intellectual property issues through the entire value chain, as Patrick mentioned, right from generation, from protection, from commercialization and enforcement. So we do have an IP policy, a national IP policy, which is really a critical tool to guide us on how we are going to handle each issue on the IP value chain. So with regards to the frameworks, we do have them in place. Now, the aspect of implementation of those various legal framework and policy framework, all I can say is that we have different players, and each player has a role to play in the different aspects or in the different elements of the IP value chain. So for example, we have the national IP policy, whose role will be to receive applications, do searches where need be, and issue the right. So as far as how far they have gone into implementation, they do receive applications for all the IPs apart from the plant varieties. That one is the mandate of the Ministry of Agriculture, and they do have a number of challenges, but as far as receiving applications and issuing rights, they do it. So I can say in that regard, we are implementing it well, though with a number of challenges. When it comes to research organizations and academia, who are key in IP generation, I think they are also generating a great deal of intellectual property. But the question is, are they protecting their IP? So the issue here is subjective, and if we go into the National IP Office, that is URSB, we can look into the statistics and find out how much or to what extent these IP generators are protecting. And in my opinion, I think we're not doing as well as we should. So in terms of IP protection, there's still a long way in which we have to put in effort to reach the desired goal. So in terms of implementation of in aspects of IP protection, I feel like there's still a long way to go. When it comes to commercialization, IP commercialization, I can say that here we might see some success in the private sector where they are doing well because they're in the business of making money. So whatever IP they generate, they are able to commercialize. But I cannot say the same is for a number of public institutions. I think this saying of, a number of our technologies are in the shelves, I think it is something that we've had a lot. So we hear a lot about great inventions or great ideas that have come through from the public institutions, but how successfully have they been commercialized? Still, I think that is also an area where we need to improve. We've not yet done so great in commercialization of IP, specifically in the public sector. I can say the informal sector might be doing also well. They are good at inventing stuff. When you go to someone in the Juakalis and you tell them, can you fabricate for me a machine that crushes maybe G-nuts? They are able to do it. They will design the machine. They are actually going to build the machine and they are going to sell it to you. So we cannot say that IP commercialization is completely failing, but it is not just doing so well, specifically in the public sector. So academia and government research institutions still have a long way to go. Then enforcement is a problem. It is still weak. We are not seeing people who infringe on other people's intellectual property rights actually being punished for it. So if there's no punishment associated, any form of punishment associated with infringement of IP, then why should one stop? Because IP has value. And if someone else is abusing it to get that value and they're not being punished, most likely they're not going to stop. So enforcement still is lacking, and efforts have been made to strengthen enforcement of IP. For example, we have a police unit in the IP office, that is URSB, that whose main work is to follow up cases of infringement. But also at the Ministry of Agriculture, as I said, they're responsible for plant breeders' rights. There is a police force. For them right now, they are looking into enforcing standards in the seed system, but still they will be in enforcement of IP regarding plant variety rights. Yeah, so we need to strengthen institutions like Uganda Bureau of Standards, Uganda Revenue Authority, so that enforcement of IP becomes something that we are not worried about, but we can bank on. So as far as the status, that is the brief that I can give. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Eliza. That was really good, insightful into the discussion into the status quo of the IP policy and the system in Uganda. And if I may go back to Mr. Patrick, so you've been in this system for quite a long time. I would like to know what how the culture has been from the time you've been in the system. We know with how Ugandans are adapting to the policies and the systems. How would you define it? Significant? Is there any significant change in the IP system from the time being around?
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe if you are to narrow down this scope to the bioeconomy space, for one, just the term itself, bioeconomy, is still a new term, and people are still trying to synthesize it and to understand it. But actually, in reality, bioeconomy has been there for a very, very long time. Whatever we've been doing, institutions that have been established to actually implement and advocate for the bioeconomy space are very old. Some of them actually very old. I mean, if you look at the likes of NARO, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Agriculture, MAIF, these are some of the old classical ministries, and a lot has been happening. And to know that there has been a clarion call and a commitment by the government of Uganda and even the colonial government itself. You look at some of the entities or the individual institutions that fall under NARO framework. So some of them were so customized, so specialized in whatever they're supposed to address. But I think, again, intellectual property and its a correlation and adaptation among the players in the bioeconomy, one has always been just the low level of awareness. What is IP? Most of these guys talk of you lecturers at the universities, those who are doing postgraduate degrees, PhDs and masters, they do research, but you find rarely would they ever use existing patent documents as references to form part of their literature. So in the process, a lot of research is going on. However, majority of them do not actually know that actually they have invented. So there's still that ignorance. Someone continues doing research, and of course the excitement of wanting to publish and have academic papers in scientific journals has always been a big problem, especially if you look in the academic space. I mean, just it's very common where like majority of the universities, the human resource structure, how it has been placed is that you're supposed to make some particular number of meet a criteria of some particular publications before you get a promotion. So by the time you decide you're going to be an associate professor or a senior lecturer or a full professor, there are a number of publications in maybe recognized journals that you must be able to present. Now, what if I decide I want to take the R&D route, and by the time I'm able to get a patent granted for my research work, Already in itself, that's a publication. Only that now you first secure the IP, and then eventually when it has been granted, it will be published. So what would be the equivalence of a patent to particular number of scientific journal publications? That's still something that on a policy level, universities may have to decide. If you get a patent, is it equivalent to 5 publication papers? That means if I want to compete for a professor job, then a patent should actually enable me to do what? To get my promotion. So awareness is still a big problem. And if you look at the institutional level, weak IP systems at the institutional level, in Uganda today, about less than 7 universities have got institutional IP policies. Now, you as a student, you could be asking yourself, if I do my research and I submit my thesis, I defend my viva voce, and I've come up with something exciting that endeavors maybe, that actually could potentially turn out into a potential IP. Who owns the IP? Aspect of ownership. Now for you, Perez, you'll say, no. For me, I'm a student, I think I did the work, I own it. Then Makerere can also come and say, no, but you are funded by the government because you're on government sponsorship. There you keep quiet. You say, I think these guys are right. But then on another note, you end up saying that, no, but I think the inventorship should belong to me as the inventor. But maybe ownership can be a shared benefit between me, the inventor, the student, the professor who supervised me, and the institution. So an IP policy sets a framework for benefit sharing and to cater for interests of every player in a particular ecosystem. So that's why at the end of the day, you realize that those weak systems are still some that you really need to integrate. If you look at the National IP Policy of 2019, those are some of the areas that need to be implemented and put in place to be able to strengthen the infrastructure systems to enable IP to be developed, to be generated, to be protected, to be commercialized, and to be enforced. And if you look at the National Development Plan 3, it was so specific and strategic in now this current status in which it is on. A specialized program on innovation, technology, development, and transfer was actually put in place, which was supposed to be under the auspice of the former Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation. Right now, of course, looking at the transition, I don't know what is going to happen in that space, how they're going to do it, but it was very clear some of the targets we put in place were meant actually honed to ensure that IP is actually enforced and supported across board. So I think those are some of the things that I feel for now, both at the national level. Some of them are a combination of policy issues that sometimes also take time, and of course, funding mechanisms to put these frameworks in place. It's also a big gap, and also infrastructure, and also the look of human capital, development, especially for the National IP Office. I mean, we still need a lot of patent examiners to tackle different aspects of technologies, because inventions come from a diverse angle of technologies. Thank you so much, Perez.
Yes, thank you so much. Now, my next question, stemming from that, you talk about, according to my questions here, you are going to discuss something to do with intellectual property rights generated from government-funded research, and this fund that comes out. So you now note that actually in the policy of 2019, some of these were not captured. So in your opinion, you've taken part in the national and international, discussions on intellectual property. How would we deal with such innovations that emanate from intellectual property rights that are funded by government, money and through research and development?
Yes, thank you so much for highlighting that. Indeed, that was an oversight. I believe it was an oversight, a big oversight in the designing of that national IP policy. And of course, these are some things that I believe because now the review of the policy, it was supposed to be done every 5 years. So I believe from 2019 plus 5, that is 2024, they should be sitting to have another review for that national IP policy. However, all is not lost. One of the key things that, of course, again, we were trying to work on to get on board in the previous setup within the S&I sector at the ministry. This was something that was actually prioritized and was meant to be handled, because a lot of, through the National Research Innovation Fund program, NRIP, these were issues that had been captured. But then, of course, we needed a form of regulation to actually, or maybe a legislation or some form of framework to actually kind of address some of these issues, and especially focusing on how do you manage IP that is generated from state-funded research and innovation. A very good point in time, you look at the drama that was unfolding between one of the professors, academicians of Makerere University, especially on COVID research. So at the end of the day, again, it goes back to that particular institution. Do you have a legal framework in place? With the establishment of the national IP policy now and approval and already running, each university now, you have an open check to set up and put in place a legal framework in form of a policy or a strategy. And this can actually be addressed. But however, that may only go to the point of how do you handle the sharing mechanism between the state that has funded the research, the university that is hosting the academician or the faculty member or the student, and the inventors of this piece of work. So at the end of the day, still a higher authority should come on board to direct and say that now, when this IP is commercialized, either maybe, let's say maybe 30% of the returns, or maybe government is going to have equity if you form a company out of this, or if you go into licensing or selling this IP, this is the amount of money that may come. And maybe part of this portion could actually go back into promoting research and innovation in the particular university. So at the end of the day, there's still that gap, but I believe now, even coming in from the private sector angle, I think these are areas that, of course, gaps that I'm very much committed to make sure that as an Innovent Labs Africa, we're going to be able to push forward through a public-private engagement to make sure that we come to see this come to light. And I think we should be able to do that. We should be able to achieve that. It's just a need of commitment, resources, and time. Yeah. Thank you, Perez. I'm done with that, I guess. Perez, you're muted. Hello?
Yes, sorry about that. That was a network problem here. Now, Ms. Eliza, if I may proceed with you. Mogi notes that there is several research being undertaken in several institutions like here at Makerere University. So I would like you to highlight how, in your opinion, you would like that we advance. How can we advance this IP system in Uganda, so that everyone knows what to do when they have an innovation, so that some of this is not left to waste, and most of them don't miss out on the incentives that really come along with the protection of their research and development. Thank you, Ms. Eliza.
Okay, thank you, Perez. Before I answer that question, I would like to comment on the issue of public-funded research, because in Nahayo, that is basically what we do. We do research. We are a government agency, and we utilize public funds. Now, in my opinion, I don't think there is indeed that question of how do we handle IP that results from public funds. But when you look at it practically, I think the lacuna is not damaging. One, any government agency that utilizes public funds, the products are for the public. So the question is, when it comes time to commercialization, how is it going to be handled? Basically, that is where the contradiction or the conflict arises. And I can say that when I argue for the government agency getting part of the revenue that results from commercialization, its main purpose, again, is so that those funds are plowed back to research. Everyone knows that the investment in research is not what it should be. There is very little funds that go into research, yet research is a very expensive business. So if we do not research, where are we heading to? So it means we have to continuously increase funding in research. Government needs to be involved. Private sector, industry needs to invest in research. And the only way in which industry, for example, Nile Breweries, is going to invest in research that Naro is doing, because Naro is producing inputs for their industry, is through IP commercialization. So when you have institutions that have developed their IP policy, such as Naro's IP policy is very clear on how IPs that result from research are going to be managed. There is part of the funds that go to the inventors, there's part of the funds that remain at the institute level, and all of that it is all in support for research. And when you commercialize, then you're making the industry contribute to research in that way. So the gap that is there at the national level, smart institutions can be able to bridge them through their policy, the institution of policy documents. So for example, when Makerere is drafting their IP policy, they should not lose the aspect of what their business is. Naro's business is innovating for a sustainable agricultural transformation. We do not stop doing that just because we are commercializing IP. We are commercializing so that we can be able to sustain innovation in the agricultural space. So now to your question, how can we advance IP? For us to know how to advance IP, we must understand the challenges that we have. And as Mugi has kept on saying, and it is going to be something that we are going to sing everywhere, awareness. Awareness is still very limited. We need to increase awareness. For me, if I was to do it, I would target strategic managers first, and I would target them hard. Why? Because IP is a strategic tool. When you have a bigger population, right now, first of all, another challenge is that, before I explain my point, another challenge is that we have very few IP professionals who are actually, their day-to-day lives is in the IP space. There are very few of us. You know, like I know Mugi because that is how small the space is. There are not many IP practitioners. So let's say we have a number 30, and here I'm overestimating, 30 IP practitioners, and they are all at technical level in their various institutions. They're not going to be able to do much. But when you have high level of IP awareness among strategic management group, you know, people who make decisions or who give strategic directions to the institutions, then we are going to see a change. So one, I think we need to increase IP awareness amongst that group of strategic managers, because IP is a strategic tool. When these level of managers understand the importance of IP, you're going to see a change in the way they plan for their institutions, the way activities are going to be implemented. All these things are going to take into consideration IP issues. But for as long as we do not have IP aware strategic leaders, we're not going to move. I think in NARO we have made the progress we've made, because right from the Director General to the directors, they are all, I can say, they are all IP experts. They have appreciated the role of IP and everything that we do. When you look at NARO's plans, you can see that clearly we are hinging ourselves on IP management to be able to achieve most of the goals that have been set for us. I think also, despite the fact that we have these IP professionals, there are some skills that are important that are still not, they're lacking. For example, if you are a student in Makerere, you have been able to invent, I can say maybe a vaccine, the corona vaccine. Where do you start? You would need some form of advisory service, IP advisory services. Who is going to give you those advisory services? The officer that is near you, maybe you have an IP officer, is that officer capable of giving you the service, the advice that you require? Then let's say you manage to get the advice and you are now ready to file for a patent. Where do you get the person who is skilled in drafting patents? There are very few people who can draft patents in Uganda. But even ideally, in an ideal situation, the patent drafters are supposed to be very specialized in their discipline. But right now, for example, myself, you will see me drafting a biochemistry-related patent, an engineering-related patent, which is not supposed to be the case. So you can see that there is still a gap in terms of the skills that the few IP professionals that we have for us to be able to advance IP. So I would, what would I do? I would put in a lot of energy in scaling, giving the right skills to the right people in IP. So training IP, if it is lawyers, on how to give IP advisory services. I would have IP officers who can draft good patent documents, yeah, I would have technology transfer offices or IP offices that actually have people who are skilled in translating research results into commercial products. That also requires a specific set of skills. So those are some of the things that I would do. But also, I think it's also important to make sure that you make incentives for inventors and innovators very clear, transparent, and accessible. So there are different ways in which you can create these incentives. You can, and through a policy document, for example, an institutional policy, something that Mugi mentioned, you know, if you are able to equate a patent that an inventor, maybe a professor in a university, to the number of publications, then that is also a way in which you can encourage people to create. In NARO right now, there is a way in which we equate patents to publications. So if you have a patent, it could be equal to 7 publications. So who wouldn't want to work hard and get a patent? If you can find other ways of maybe recognizing people who have invented, where they can also be benefiting financial benefit so that they can continue inventing. The problem is when we have people who are good at inventing being distracted from the process of invention because they must survive. So if you spend time to create your vaccine, but you cannot benefit from that creation, I doubt that you'd be encouraged to continue inventing. But if you can benefit and someone else takes that responsibility of commercialization, then you're most likely going to go back and invent something else. So finding ways to make inventions or the innovation process lucrative is something that I would look into to advance IP. Back to you, Perez.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Eliza. Now, Eliza, I'd like to go back to Patrick. Mr. Patrick notes that the ministry had a big hand in the IP policy that was, passed back in 2019. Now, I would want to ask in your opinion, looking at the bioeconomy. We are looking at how do we facilitate, how do we actually accelerate research and development and actually research and innovation in the country. So when you look at our current system now, and the transition that is ongoing, where do you see the fate of the intellectual property system in Uganda? Just relate with our policy to the bioeconomy and the transition that is ongoing. Where do you see this system of intellectual property in Uganda?
Yeah, of course. At the end of the day, some of these things maybe you may find some of the executive decisions that take place. I, as a civil servant, or maybe my sister Eliza, we may not have control over them. These external factors that we may not have control over them. But of course, now I think one of the most important kind of like entry points here is largely the implementation of that policy. That mandate was actually largely vested on the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation. But of course, now with these transitional engagements happening, I really don't know what's going to happen. That's something that really kind of like lies in limbo. And I wouldn't want to preempt what maybe the new leadership is going to take on board. But however, one of the key things that I know, it's very, like for example, when we were designing the National Development Plan 3, and also setting the targets for the program on innovation, technology development and transfer, we were so specific on the kind of targets that we really wanted to see emerge for this country in the next 5 years. Now, this of course has got a setback, and I mean it's something that we could not anticipate. So, but one of the key things that I know is the NDP3 implementation of the NDP3. One of the strategic directions that government is proposing is through public-private partnerships for them to be able to implement and achieve the intended goals and aspirations of NDP3. So that could be the framework that maybe some of us as practitioners, now that we are leaving the service and we are introducing into the private sector, the entry point that we can actually be able to come in and support. Because you see, when some of these, when policies are set, policies are never created for the government. It's for the common mwananchi, you and me. And the moment you're able to identify what works for you, then you're able to identify what should be done that was never captured in the design of these policies. At the very first point. So I think all is not lost. Personally, I believe the kind of approach you're going to take from Innovent Labs Africa, I think reaching out through public-private partnerships would still be one of the key things that you're so excited and passionate to see that it comes to pass. So I don't feel personally the pinch. It's just a matter of meeting the various key stakeholders within the public setting and to drive the agenda and say we're going to be able to implement this. And some of the programs, initiatives we'll be setting up as an organization, I think we'll be able to fill this gap, because even the IP policy itself its implementation, the National IP Office cannot. So it took a kind of like a stakeholder approach. It will take, indeed, and that's what it was done by the time they're setting up the steering committee. It had to include people from different MDAs to make sure that we're able to arrive to a common target, seeing that the policy begins to reap the benefits for the country. Yeah, thank you.
Hello?
Yes, please.
We've lost Perez.
I think we've lost him now.
I'm sorry, my network is quite poor. I actually got disconnected. I really am here.
Okay, maybe to add on what Patrick has said, there is, we have to appreciate that we need to build an ecosystem. This ecosystem, of course, will be, as again he mentioned, various stakeholders. We'll have various stakeholders. We need to have the IP office active. We need to have the academia, research institutions, the Council for Science and Technology, or whoever it is that is responsible for driving the STI agenda in the country. We need the informal sector. We need the industry, private sector. We need everyone on board. And we need everyone to have the same level of appreciation of IP, because IP touches the lives of everyone. We keep on saying economies are increasingly becoming knowledge-based. So how are we going to drive our economy into a knowledge-based economy when we are not looking or hinging ourselves on IP? So this ecosystem needs to be strengthened. The networks need to be strong. The public-private partnerships, public-public partnerships need to be seen to be strong, right from IP generation to IP protection to IP commercialization and IP enforcement. I want to see a scenario where NARO is collaborating with Nile breweries, and we have an IP, a joint IP or something like that. I want to see a situation where we are able to, like, institutions can come together, UNBS and let's say police working together so that the rights of IP holders are withheld. So the ecosystem needs to be built, strengthened, the linkages within that ecosystem more than ever strengthened. We avoid this thing of working in silos. This is our policy. We are going to work like this. It cannot take us far. And the NDP3, everything, when you read it, you can see that we are heading towards a knowledge economy. You know, you can't talk about agro-industrialization and you're thinking about hose. hoes and axes. Agro-industrialization, you can only relate to it, you can only look at it when you're talking about high-tech. So IP is in the heart of our economy right now, whether we like it or not, and it is a high time that we all embrace it and do everything that we can to be able to utilize so that we can benefit from that system. Perez, I think I have bridged the gap. If you're on, you can.
Yes, yes, I'm on actually. I'm on. Thank you so much, Ms. Eliza. Now, as we conclude, I would like to invite Mr. Patrick to take us through how the current IP system ensures protection of traditional remedies. You know, when you talk about like the case of COVIDX of Makerere University, Bara University Science and Technology. We want to know what exactly is patentable when we are dealing with these remedies that emanate from maybe natural resources, traditional remedies, indigenous knowledge even itself, so that we protect it against misappropriation and maybe exploitation from malicious, players in the system. So how can we attach an incentive value to our traditional knowledge? And I also noted that you probably could tell us how you think we can develop our own specific systems, to protect some of this traditional knowledge as we conclude. And then I think the other speaker, you could be preparing to tell us what you think would be, that change. We talked about reviewing the IP policy every 5 years. So what could be that change you'd want to make, to see made, or maybe that implementation you could want to oversee so that the IP policy of Uganda is able to accelerate research and innovation in Uganda? Yes, Mr. Patrick, traditional knowledge and traditional remedies.
Yeah, thank you. Number one, I think both at the global space, that's at the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, in Geneva, a lot has been happening when it comes to putting in place regimes for protecting traditional knowledge and also what we refer to as traditional cultural expressions, the TCEs. And also at the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, we've got also an officer, I think, who's specifically responsible for traditional knowledge. Yes, one of the key policies that were being developed within the framework of the former ministry was a policy on traditional knowledge. Yeah, actually on indigenous knowledge, to be precise. So of course, that's also again another development that we don't know where it's gonna end, but we hope that the new management can actually prioritize to see that that comes to conclusion. Of course, some of the critical key stakeholders in that space was the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, because each of these cultural institutions are vested under their mandate. So definitely it requires collective efforts to realize that. But however, in most cases, issues to do with traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions, they are communally owned. They're communally owned, and it becomes very difficult to come up one day as parents and you say that I own this practice and I'm going to seek a patent for it so that you're able to acquire exclusive rights over it. Now that may not work. You may not succeed in that because a community-owned kind of like a knowledge system can never be individualized. I'll give you a case study. One of the most utilized culinary spices that we use so much in Uganda, and also, but I think it was brought in Uganda by the Asian community, is turmeric, also known as chinzari. Yeah. And I think all of you could be knowing it. It's yellow and yeah, very common if you want to put in pilau and other things, chinzari. Now these are a plant or a spice that has been used for millennia among the Asian communities. And it has diverse therapeutic applications, which every Indian person, I believe, knows. It's an obvious thing. So one of the universities in the US, University of Mississippi, they decided to seek a patent before the United States Patent Trademark Office, seeking protection for a new functionality or the wound healing properties of turmeric. They went ahead, submitted an application before the USPTO, and the patent was granted. It was granted. However, the equivalent of Uganda Industrial Research Institute in India, which is called the Council for Industrial Research Institute, CSRI, filed an opposition before the USPTO on grounds that that particular application should be nullified or invalidated on grounds of lack of novelty. And again, this is common knowledge because among the Indian community, this is a spice that has been known for ages and part of the use is wound healing. So there was nothing new and there was nothing inventive in this respect to that particular application. It was a strong pull, a strong move, very laborious, but thank God the Indian community was able to win that case. And that patent application was, the patent that had been granted was invalidated or it was revoked. So that meant it was hit on the grounds of lack of novelty, and this also contributed to part of indigenous knowledge. So, and today, one of the, especially if you look at, like, for example, the medicinal plants, normally mere discoveries are not patentable. A mere discovery is not patentable, or any discovery cannot be patented. If today you go ahead and you say that I've discovered that this plant can treat COVID, it's okay. That is the first step. Very good, knowledge is known. Now the next thing you need to go on board is you identifying the active ingredient that is responsible for the treatment of COVID in plant P. Still, that is not patentable. You cannot protect or seek a patent for that particular compound. Why? You found it in its natural state. That's the compound that was created by nature, God created. So really there's nothing exceptional that you did to actually do what? To say that you created that compound. However, should you go ahead and come up with a method or a process of extracting that compound from its natural state in that particular plant, whether it's the leaves, the bark, or the roots, and you present a method which can potentially turn out to be an industrial process of extracting or isolating compound X from plant P extracts to a potential therapeutic product that can be marketed, there you may qualify to get a patent in form of a process patent. For the particular compound, unless you go and after you've tested the efficacy of the particular compounds that you found in nature, and you're able to purify and as well as modify that particular compound and present another compound which is a derivative of that compound, but which has got efficacy that outbeats the natural one, there you can also go ahead and be able to file for a patent for a product of a new chemical entity. And that is how the likes of the antibiotics, penicillin, the original penicillin, a lot of modifications have actually been done on that core structure of penicillin. I mean, you know, penicillin, these are the core pharmacophore is what we call the beta lactams, yeah? So a lot has been done on that bit, and so to be able to fight the so-called penicillin resistance, because especially with these microbes that are now already weakening that the attack that ring enclosing mechanism of the beta lactam ring. So now, I think when we look at strategies that maybe as government we may need to be able to, I mean, all these things are policy frameworks ordinarily. Setting up a system takes kind of strength when we are looking at what? Legal frameworks that can support these endeavors. And at the end of the day, once those are put in place, then even benefit sharing mechanisms between the community and who wants to exploit it should actually be there. That's why you find Uganda National Council of Science and Technology are the custodians of this kind of like the consent forms to actually try to exploit things within the biospace, right? And also there's that what we call the consent agreements or the consent notes. Then there's also what you call the material transfer agreements. If at all you want to pick a material from Uganda, you want to take it maybe to the US, you just don't do it. You need some, you need permission to be able to do that. So I think it's all about having the right policies. I think some of them are in place, but to go ahead and look at the specifics that might correlate firmly with the bioeconomy space to be able to get what is required, what can work, and what needs to be done to cater for the needs of every stakeholder in that space. I submit.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Patrick. That was really a good submission. And I'd want now to go back to Eliza and Nahayo, who I probably highlight the question next call. But I want you to also speak to young scientists out there. You noted that the spaces for intellectual property rights, are just monopolized by a small number of people that, to the extent that actually know each other so well. So how would they, advance into these spaces? How would you advise them? But I would also want you to note on that wish for you, what you would want to see implemented upon revision, so that our system of intellectual property in Uganda, continues to progress, and maybe we can capture all the missing points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Perez. I wanted to add something on traditional knowledge, and before I continue. One, who is complaining about traditional knowledge? It is mostly the countries who are rich in culture that want their traditional knowledge protected. You'll find countries that are not so rich in culture, like US, they do not care about traditional knowledge. And there's a reason as to why Uganda should be concerned about protecting her traditional knowledge. It is bound to be misused by third parties for their own gain. Whether it is in developing pharmaceutical products, whatever it is, we are at a loss if we do not find ways to protect traditional knowledge. But when we develop a system to protect traditional knowledge, we have to be clear, what is it that we want this system to do for us? Do we want to just preserve traditional knowledge? Is it that we want to stop these other people from using our traditional knowledge without our consent? Or is it that we want communities to commercially benefit from their traditional knowledge? If we think through this, the way in which we are going to approach the development of the framework that protects traditional knowledge is going to be very specific. Just another comment. In one of our laws, the Industrial Property Act requires that when you apply for a patent for a product that is as a result of a genetic material, you are required to give the origin of where that material comes from. So you could say if a German, for example, wants to protect a certain drug that is as a product of Uganda's genetic material, they will be required to state clearly where it is that they got that material. So you can see that even the IP system is trying to put checks on biopiracy so that we do not have situations where people are not only using our genetic resources for their gain, but also benefit comes back for the people who take care of these genetic resources, and if there's any traditional knowledge that goes hand in hand with that resource. Okay, you asked me to respond to this question that Josh asked, where he thinks IPR creates monopolies and big companies may harm the small companies, and where does the IPR protect small companies? Here, Josh is assuming that small companies are not inventive. But indeed, the IP system only works when it gives, you have that monopoly aspect. The IP system would not work, it would not be useful if we do not have the aspect of monopoly rights associated with it. It works because of the monopoly, whatever, but there is a balance. The balance comes in when these monopoly rights have a time limit. You cannot have a patent forever. After a certain period of time, that patent expires and it enters into the public domain. Someone asked me.
You're in biosciences, eh?
Okay, so I was saying there's a balance to that monopoly right where it is bound by a specific time period. So once that time period has elapsed, then benefit comes back to the society. That technology, that information about the technology can enter into the public domain and can be utilized by the society. So it's about balance. Monopoly rights vis-a-vis benefit to the entire society. Now, will they stop small companies? Are they harming small companies? I don't think they are harming small companies, because by the time you apply for a patent which gives you a monopoly, then you have actually invested in research. So if small companies are not investing in research so that they can also come up with their own patents, which will grant them their own monopolies, then I do not think it is fair for them to expect big companies to invest in R&D and then they want to reap the benefits. So I think the balance between the monopoly rights and the benefits to the public makes it a good system so that people who keep inventing can invent, enjoy the monopoly, but also the public can enjoy once that patent comes into the public domain. What would I do? You had asked with regards to the IP policy. I wouldn't rush to make a comment on what I would change, because the truth of the matter is implementation of that policy has not gone a long way. I prefer learning from whatever it is that we've done. So right now, we cannot say change this, improve on this. We do not know if it would work or not. So we have said, for example, the IP policy talks of institutional policies for institutions should develop their own IP institutional policies. But how many of these have institutional IP policy? So we cannot know whether that provision in the IP policy works or not. So until implementation has been done on the IP policy, it would be a rush to make suggestions on what could be changed. For me, I think for a start, it is a good policy to get the ball rolling, and any additions and improvements should be made when we have a good grasp of what it is that has worked, and for what has not worked, why it is that it has not worked. Otherwise, I think we have good laws, we have a good IP policy to start, and then improvement can always come once we understand where the weaknesses lie. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Eliza. That was really great.
Perez, hello? 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 Hello?
I think I went off, but looking at the bioeconomy, and actually Ms. Eliza notes that we are, going into a knowledge-based economy, which is actually the whole concept in bioeconomy. How can we design an institutional framework looking at the research and development, how people adapt into the IP system, and how we, as a country, as you conclude, as a country, how do we converge into this bioeconomy and see it through? I had actually a note to Mr. Peter was here quite earlier, Dr. Peter Wanyama. I think he's the one who first shared with me the IP policy that was ongoing, and he notes that actually you're part of his team. So how do you see we can design an institutional framework to make sure that we see this policy through, upon its approval, and undertake it, so that looking at also this intellectual property system that we just discussed in this session, how do we design an institutional framework so that this knowledge comes from the people, and they have trust in the system, and we can advance our bioeconomy all at large? Thank you.
Is that for me?
Yes, it is. It's for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, because I tried to call, talk, and you're not getting me. Maybe just before I dive into that, I just wanted to add something small on Josh's, this guy called Josh was talking about a monopoly big company taking on small company. Now, guys, having an IP right granted to you, thus transforming it into an IP asset, does not guarantee you that you're going to make economic gain out of that particular IP. You may be the inventor, you've acquired this patent, it has been granted to you, but you do not have the business acumen to convert that knowledge into practice. That's how when you come to the commercialization space, there are very many modalities that you can use to gain value or create value or generate value from your IP. If you've got the best acumen, then you can actually self-exploit it by either integrating it into your own enterprise. If you do not have an enterprise, you can decide, I'm going to start a new venture that is going to be able to help me commercialize this particular IP. The other bit, you might decide, I just want to sell this thing. You could be that your effort is R&D, secure IP, protect, granted to you, you acquire them. Then you want, to me, my business is I generate and sell IP. You can sell it off through what you call an assignment. But then you can also decide, why don't I license this patent to Mukwano, to maybe Pepsi Cola, a Century Bottling Company, Coca-Cola Namamve, and maybe Nile Breweries. So you actually come into an agreement in multiple licensing agreements. Each one of them will be paying a certain amount of money, depending on the agreed framework that you put between the two parties. So, and again, being small, I don't know when you say small, what small means. Those who are tech savvy, very recently you've been looking at Facebook wanting to rebrand and change its Facebook logo to Meta. I don't know how many of you have been keen on that. And this small company that there in the US still had already registered the trademark logo Meta. So they're saying, no, Facebook can actually not do this. They have to compensate us if they are going to do what? To want to take over this logo. Now, that company is saying or is presenting a proposal of $20 million to Facebook to be able to pay them for them to withdraw and cancel their name of using the word Meta as a trademark so that Facebook can take it over it. Now, as we speak today, Facebook, towards the close of last year, Facebook was worth nearly $1 trillion. $1 trillion. I don't know how much money is that in Uganda currency. $1 trillion, that was the worth of Facebook. Now this small company comes 20 million. What's $20 million to Facebook? That's peanut. So that's why you find as a small company, as a micro SME, sometimes acquiring IP might also be strategic, because if you enter into a space of the big guns, it's an opportunity for you to make money, because it's either like maybe a big pharmaceutical company comes and says, hey, we want to buy you out. What's your value? Or maybe we want an exclusive license from you. What is the value? So that's how things can actually turn out to be a benefit. So sometimes being small is good. So that's what I wanted to say to my friend Josh. So now, Mr. Perez, going back to your question. Honestly, I think one of the strategic areas that I'm also going to work very closely with Dr. Wanyama and also Dr. Fortunate Muyambi of Isteco is to actually just tease out and have like a standalone component of a strategy relating to IP value chain management for the bioeconomy. I think that is going to be quite such that when you tease it out, then you're actually able to focus on it, and it becomes focus oriented to address the various aspects of generation, how to protect, the mechanism of protection, how to commercialize, and also the enforcement. Other than that, if you look at it from a bigger perspective, it might lose its kind of like its relevance and significance. So I think there'll be need for us to tease it out and make it a standalone from the bigger picture, so that this is the strategic direction we are going to take as far as implementing the bioeconomy policy, both at the national and the regional level is concerned. Now that is going to give it more meat. And so I think, of course, the same platforms are going to be utilized, I believe. The same policy designs are going to be undertaken, where you need to do comprehensive stakeholder engagement to make sure that you achieve what you really want. So to me, I think that is the best approach you can be talking about. And that's the best direction, I think. And it will take a mix of both public-public engagements, public-private, as well as the private-private engagements to have that kind of like a synergistic effect in designing a policy or strategy framework as relates to IP in the bioeconomy and what we need to do to take it forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patrick. I don't know, I'd gone off, but Mr. Patrick Mugisha is managing partner and co-founder, Innovate Labs Africa.
Hello?
Getting unstable as we conclude. But it's a discussion I thought to bring to table to instill confidence into young scientists so that they know that their research is actually protected, their research is safe in their hands, and they should know how to protect it. As we call upon innovations towards the bioeconomy and get into the in the knowledge-based economy. So I want to thank you so much for honoring our invite, for making it here. I noted a few people on the call. We had our sponsors from UBBC. Mr. Eric Kagezi was with us, and of course, Dr. Peter was also with us. Part of our staff came in, I think they left shortly. We want to thank the colleagues, students who made it, and part of the alumni community. I saw Ms. Fatuma Bavige, who gave us a session a while ago on soft skills. So I want to thank you so much for making it. As we conclude this bioeconomy discussion, we are going to, I don't know if I should, call upon people to maybe say your, last remarks, to students, calling upon them into these spaces of the bioeconomy. But the last session we shall have this month, we are going to have a very big panel. I'm inviting the Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Honorable Musenero Monica, Doctor, to come and really, we look at how the government, what package does the government have for us, as we know, we foster this bioeconomy policy in research and innovation. What's their stand? She tells us maybe the status of our ministry, how the transition is ongoing. These are some of the things we want to task her to take us through when we invite her at the end of this month. As we conclude this season that, started with the bioeconomy and the knowledge-based economy. I don't know if Mr. Patrick or Eliza, you have anything to say, but if you do, I will give each one of you 1 minute. If not, we shall then end here.
No, I think these are very important engagements, and I really hope we can actually be able to take this to another level. And even towards the end of that bigger forum that you're actually going to be able to design, it will be very important to possibly be part of that. And so that we're able to make it clear that even as much as the transition is taking place, I think as we've moved on, we still have to bring the country as the epicenter of everyone's interest. And so, well, whatever the new management decides to embark on, I think we are there up for partnership to make sure that we take this agenda forward. So working through a public-private partnership with the new management of the sector, we'll be happy. So giving an opportunity to be part of that, I'll be happy. It will be good, yeah, for advocacy. Thank you so much. And for the students, I think keep working hard and just keep thinking. Keep thinking. Why Innovate Labs Africa exists is that we'll be developing some sessions just for brainstorming. Maybe you could be looking at how do I manage my ideas? How do I transform an idea into a tangible product? So that's why we exist as ILA, and I look forward to working as having either maybe an engagement with this society formally, so that we can be able to take this agenda forward. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Patrick. Yes, Ms. Eliza.
Mine is actually to the students. I want to assure you that actually you are inventors, you're innovators. And maybe you even invented something and up to now you're not aware. But moving forward, try to seek for information that is going to be useful to you. And whatever your brilliant minds come up with, because I can assure you there is value in those creations of your mind. Many times we underestimate things that we create. You know, we think that, anyone could have thought about it, but you'll be surprised when you look through patent documents at the things that are patented. So when you're not sure, or even when you're sure, seek for information. And I know right now you may not know where to go. So if there's any place I would direct you, is try to reach out to the IP office. At least it's the most central place I can think of right now. They have contacts of any other IP practitioner. If they need to further refer you to someone, they'll be able to refer you. Seek assistance of the IP office in whichever aspect of IP that you're stuck. You've come up with something, but you are not sure where to go. You receive all sorts of advice. They could help you in a patent search so that you get information on how to proceed or develop or improve on an already existing technology. It could be that they advise you on whom to go to so that you can have your patent drafted, or at least have assistance in drafting your patent. Or they could show you how you could apply for it. But don't die in your own movie. Go seek assistance, and if you do not know where to go, you go to the IP office. But Patrick here with his company, they also offer the same services. So always try to reach out to someone before you decide to give up on something or bury it. So that is my parting shot, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Eliza. One of our audiences here, actually, Mr. Ian Busura, who was one of my inspirations here, is asking for the contacts. I think we can take this minute, maybe share contacts with a few colleagues on the call. And our online viewers, those who will join us later, I think they'll be able to get this information. And usually we generate reports. So most of these ideas generated here on the discussion actually submitted and taken care of with our sponsors and the different authorities. I look forward to the next session and having you as we interact with the current Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation and several other colleagues that will come along with her. And I hope we'll be in touch and we'll tackle very more points on that. So the contacts have been shared, and I hope you'll be in touch with our guest speakers. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next session. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.